Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, some grim news from San Diego County's medical examiner, and 3 California cities move to declare bankruptcy this summer. What it means to the state and how San Diego avoided the same fate. Also tonight, a federal report is due this week on tube problems at the San Onofre nuclear power plant. Plus, the FDA approves a pill to stop the spread of the virus that causes AIDS. And beachgoers beware. There's a jellyfish alert in San Diego waters. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Peggy Pico. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. San Diego County Medical Examiner says there were a record number of suicides and murder-suicides last year. Prescription drugs were the #1 cause of accidental death in San Diego County. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg has more on the disturbing trends.
The report shows 267 San Diegans died from an accidental overdose of prescription drugs last year. It's the second year in a row that deaths linked to prescription drugs surpass those due to motor vehicle crashes. Chief Deputy Medical Examiner Jonathan Lucas says it's a bad sign.
I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed and a little alarmed. And I don't know how many more years this problem has to grow.
Heroin overdoses killed 80 San Diegans in 2011. It was the biggest cause of drug-related deaths for people under 30. Here's another alarming stat. Deaths from methamphetamine reached a 12-year high.
We just need to pay attention to this. We focus on heroin, we focus on alcohol and the bath salts, and they get a lot of headlines. Methamphetamine's always been there, and methamphetamine is still our biggest issue.
Suicides also rose in 2011. Last year in San Diego County, 392 people took their own life.
We as a county need to realize that this is a growing problem. The county has addressed it and provided resources for people to help prevent a preventable problem.
The county has mental health counselors available 24/7. The number for the county crisis line is on your screen. It's 888-724-7240. The Food and Drug Administration has approved a drug meant to prevent the spread of the virus that causes AIDS. Truvada is made by Gilead Sciences with the offices in Oceanside. The pill became available in 2004, but only to people who were already HIV positive. Today's FDA decision allows the pill's maker to market the drug to people who don't have the virus but are at high risk of getting it. For example, those who have HIV-infected partners. If you see one of these off the San Diego shoreline, be extra careful. 135 beachgoers got stung by jellyfish at Encinitas beaches on Sunday. Lifeguards say 2 species of jellyfish are now in the area because of a warm current moving up from the south. Some appear to be quite large, up to 6 feet long. Jellyfish stings typically cause a painful rash, which can be treated with vinegar and water. This was moving day for members of the San Diego City Council. They moved downstairs with a few floors while workers do some remodeling up on the 10th floor of City Hall. The workers are adding a new office to the 9th Council District. The remodeling is expected to be finished in 2 months. The council staff says the biggest challenge is finding their way around all the cubicles. San Diego Mayor Jerry Sanders is in Washington to speak out against possible defense spending cuts. The Pentagon is set to lose $500 billion in January if Congress can't lower the federal deficit. A recent report says about a quarter of the jobs on our region rely on defense spending. Sanders will speak at a news conference organized by the Aerospace Industries Association, which claims defense cuts could lead to staggering job losses across the country. This week, a team of federal investigators are expected to release their final report on tubeware inside the steam generators at San Onofre nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, the plant remains offline after numerous tubes that carry radioactive water were found to have accelerated wear. That resulted in a tiny radioactive leak back in January. Joining me with a closer look into the problem is Murray Jennings. He's a professor at San Diego State University College of Business Administration. Previously, he worked at San Onofre. Murray, The number of tubes that are showing accelerated wear are unprecedented. The NRC confirmed that.
Yes.
Tell us, as a former engineer at the power plant, what that means.
Well, what that means is that the water and the steam flow through those steam generators was different than what they expected. When they did the modeling with the computer, they predicted a certain set of parameters that would be operated with, and that did not occur. So these tubes got much more flow, much more pressure transients on them than expected.
The NRC report found that the modeling, they believe, is probably the primary issue and the problem. Explain to us about this computer modeling, why it's an issue, and why you think it's probably the biggest issue.
Well, I thought it was the problem all along. The model is what you use to predict flow. They can't actually measure it to be exact and everything. So they have to do a model and then design for that model. Well, when you had this number of tubes showing this wear and a failure this quickly, that's really the only thing that could go wrong, is that the model was wrong to begin with, and so you saw a whole different operating environment than you expected.
Yeah, so where do you go from here? How do you move forward if the modeling's gone, the tubes are in there, and they're not working the way they should be?
Well, a couple of options. One is to remodel and see what would be the correct operating parameters and see where you can operate these steam generators at a safe level, and then do so at that power level. Another option is to do the model over again and then see what you could do to stake the tubes or put in different supports to change the parameters so that you could operate at a higher power. Or you can do a combination of the two.
It sounds like this is going to take quite a bit of time. Is this something that would take years? Give us some guidelines on how long that could take.
Well, it would take years to get new steam generators in, to redo the modeling and figure out a plan to change the parameters so that you could operate it safely. That could be done this summer.
Whose responsibility is this? Was it Edison's for how they tested it, for getting was it the manufacturers? Whose responsibility is it, and who is going to be on the hook for following up?
Well, the computer codes are the manufacturer's codes. Edison doesn't have these codes. So the manufacturer made the error. Now, Edison, as the operator, is ultimately responsible for whatever goes into that plant. So they had to validate the codes, whether or not they had the expertise to know whether or not the codes were inaccurate. That's something that remains to be seen. But ultimately, I think the manufacturer is the one at fault here.
Now, I did want to say, we've asked Southern California Edison to come on the show and talk about it. They're not talking right now to us. They've declined, I should say. You had a possible reason for that.
Well, the NRC is involved, and the NRC is talking. And if you're Edison and the NRC is making reports and public meetings and such, you don't want to go out there and contradict them or be at odds. It doesn't do any good for the public to think that Edison and the NRC are disagreeing. You let the NRC talk, and then when that's done and you know what you want to do to fix the problem, then you come out and say what is wrong and what you're going to do about it.
Just very quickly, there's talk that there's some generators that can start up again very soon. Do you think that's possible? Is that realistic?
Well, I thought it was possible a couple months ago. Once they identified what the cause was, and in addition to the computer code, they've identified that Unit 3 had a manufacturing problem, that some material was wrong. So that means they know there's a difference between Unit 2 and 3. Unit 2 is only the computer code issue. Once they understood that, yes, they could remodel and figure out what would be the right power level.
All right. Murray Jennings, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I'm now joined by Arnie Gunderson by phone. He's a nuclear consultant for the environmental group Friends of the Earth, and he wrote a report for them on the steam generator problem at San Onofre. Arnie, you were very critical of the information that's been coming out regarding the number of tubes showing accelerated wear at the nuclear power plant. Tell us why.
Well, compared to the remainder of the nuclear industry, the wear at San Onofre is in a different state compared to everybody else. There's only been about 400 tubes failed across the nation, yet San Onofre had 1,300 tubes fail.
You used leaked documents in compiling the data for your report. How did you obtain them, and what did they tell you?
Well, the documents came from the attorneys at Friends of the Earth, and I really don't know where. But what they told us was that the wear in Unit 2 was identical to the wear in Unit 3. The way the pipes were vibrating, all of the vibrational modes were identical in both two units. So the argument that Unit 2 is different than Unit 1 Unit 2 has had fewer pipes plugged, 500 compared to 800. But still, the way they are failing, the vibrational modes that they're failing in, is identical between the two units.
Okay, previously on our program, you spoke about the new generators not being like for like, basically a different design from the original. Why is that a concern?
Well, the process is that if you make major changes in a design, you're supposed to let the Nuclear Regulatory Commission know that the changes have occurred. And that didn't happen. Back in 2006, when San Onofre decided to replace these generators, they didn't tell the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that they were going to make massive changes to the generators. I believe that had the NRC known, they would have found the problems, specifically that the Mitsubishi, the company that had built this generator, had no experience building this type of generator. I think then it would have gotten increased scrutiny, and we wouldn't be having this discussion today.
The NRC team analyzing the problem will come out with its final report this week. What do you expect that they'll find?
Well, I think the biggest news I heard from the leaked report, as well as from the NRC last month, was that the tubes were rattling for months, and they could hear them on something called acoustic monitors, and they didn't do anything about it. So the tube that failed, they could hear bouncing around inside the generator, and Edison didn't react. They waited for it to break. I think that will be a major point that the NRC will be concerned about.
All right, Arnie Gunderson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Today, San Bernardino leaders are expected to declare a fiscal emergency, paving the way to declaring bankruptcy. The city joins a growing list of financially bankrupt California cities. And it wasn't so long ago that San Diego considered bankruptcy as a way out of chronic multi-million-dollar deficits. Pat Shea, a bankruptcy attorney in San Diego, joins me to talk about factors contributing to the financial meltdown in San Bernardino. Thanks for being here. Pat, give us the 30-second rendition of what led San Bernardino to this point.
Sure. San Bernardino has a systemic financial problem, which it's been unable to address. Municipal bankruptcies usually are one of two things, either an acute problem like the one in Mammoth Lakes where they had a lawsuit that went badly for them, or if you've just improperly managed your financial condition. San Bernardino is in the latter group. They've had increases in fixed obligations that they've added to over the years, bond indebtedness, operating expenses, salaries and pensions, and they've had flattened revenues coming in and the prospect of things getting worse. They were not able to work out a deal with everybody, so they're going to wind up in bankruptcy.
Yeah, just as we were talking, just like an individual would. You try to work it out, and when you don't, you go in this direction. Three California cities have recently either filed for bankruptcy or said they're going to. Is there a connection, or do these all share one common denominator?
Well, it's not a common denominator, but for the ones that have systemic problems in their financial condition, there's a recurring theme, and that is the inability to deal substantively with specific financial problems in various sectors of your financial condition. Meaning, if you have a problem with your labor system, you have to deal with that. If you have bond indebtedness that's too high, you have to deal with that. If you have infrastructure you haven't dealt with, you have to deal with that.
And pensions.
And pensions. And if you don't deal with those things when they come up early, you will wind up pushing the can down the road until you can't avoid it any longer, and then you go into bankruptcy.
For those who don't know, what's the nuts and bolts of what happens when a city files for bankruptcy? What happens to the workers, who gets paid, who doesn't? What happens logistically?
Yeah, interestingly, for municipalities, not a lot happens that is spectacular on the front end. Mm-hmm. The entity continues to operate, it continues to pay its employees, it continues to be open for business, issue permits, do whatever it's supposed to do, to the extent that it has the money to do it. What does happen is all of the creditor and all the claimant classes, in a sense, sit down and calm down and wait for the municipality to come up with a plan, which is their outline for what they would like to do to reassert and reachieve financial stability.
Okay, speaking of plans, in 2005, you advocated for San Diego to file for bankruptcy.
I did.
They did not do it.
They didn't.
Now, right now. So how do you feel, how good of a job do you think they've done in sort of the city leaders getting our financial house in order here?
Well, I think that they have become more aware and openly aware. You remember back in the 2005 timeframe, there was a big debate about whether we had a problem in the first place. That was the first debate we had. I think that we've come a long way in acknowledging that we have very serious structural financial issues, and they have to be addressed. Some of them have been addressed. Some of them continue to be nagging problems, and it's really a function of how we continue to manage those and monitor those into the future.
Orange County took a long time. They were one of the first to file. How long does it take to recover? And with the San Bernardino, once things get going, will that have sort of an impact on the state?
Well, so there's two questions. One, how long does it take to come out, and what's the impact? It does take some time to go through the process. In Orange County, it took just under 2 years to come up with a plan. That's not a short amount of time, but in terms of government action, it's not that long a period of time either to go from insolvent to solvent. These processes tend to be quicker, I think, than trying to assess them outside of bankruptcy because you're dealing with them all at once. The impact on the state and the impact on the communities is really a function of how successful these programs are. If you have municipalities that go into Chapter 9 and they recover quickly, they come up with plans quickly, and they reach consensus with their creditor classes quickly, their credit gets reestablished and reinvigorated. And to the extent that other municipalities in the area take the lead from that, they get the benefit as well.
They're going to recover a little bit faster depending if they move. State law actually makes it more difficult now to file for Chapter 9. Tell me about that.
It does. I'm not a fan of the new law that was enacted last year, which requires a negotiating period before a municipality can go into bankruptcy unless they declare a financial emergency or fiscal emergency, which San Bernardino is likely to do. But the Bankruptcy Code also already provides any number of obligations of municipalities to negotiate with all of their creditor classes, including labor unions and pensions and bondholders and whatnot. So my belief is that the state law really just sort of gets in the way of getting on with the problem.
All right. We'll be following this story closely. Pat Che, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
The state pension fund for more than 1 million public employees reports it only got a 1% return on its investments last year. That's far short of the projected annual return of 7.5%. CalPERS may try to make up the difference by asking for more contributions by state and local governments. Leaders of the Cal State University system says they'll either need to slash enrollment or increase tuition if Governor Jerry Brown's tax measures don't pass. CSU trustees meet tomorrow to discuss their options, including a cut to student enrollment by 1.5% or a projected tuition hike of about 5% starting in January. They also said they may have to cut pay and benefits for their employees. Gas prices have started to creep back up again. The roller coaster ride at the pump has prompted some San Diego drivers to look at other ways to fuel their cars. KPBS business and environment reporter Arnie Gunderson has that story.
Free chips define the Casa de Bandini experience almost as much as the oversized margaritas. And all of the chips served at the Carlsbad restaurant are cooked here.
As you can see, we go through a lot of chips here at Casa de Bandini. And we have a big vat that we make chips in. We go through about 32 5-gallon containers of oil a week.
That used cooking oil has to go somewhere. It's stored out back until Max Minahan picks it up.
Go ahead, open my bin up, unlock it, take the cap off the hose, go ahead and get the oil.
Minahan works for an Escondido startup called Buster Biofuels.
Turn the pump on.
The company collects used cooking oil,
Keep sucking.
filters it,
Take my hose out,
treats it,
cap it,
and turns it into biodiesel.
pack up, and we're off.
The firm has a number of customers, including Legoland.
We have a variety of restaurants throughout the park that obviously produce grease through making the food. So we collect that, and Buster Biofuels comes and picks it up to turn it into something usable.
So the cars here are electric, and they don't really run on fuel, but part of what Legoland is doing is helping build the energy future.
We're using used cooking oil, which is a low-value feedstock that we're able to transform into biodiesel.
Buster Halterman is the founder and CEO.
What's going on, man?
He's hoping to build a facility that'll be able to process all the used cooking oil he rounds up. The resulting biodiesel will be ready for the fuel tank.
You know, most diesel engines need little or no conversions whatsoever, and it can literally be mixed with diesel fuel in virtually any mixture. So there's not a whole lot of infrastructure change with the existing vehicles out there.
Biodiesel blends are selling for as much as 30 cents a gallon less than regular diesel, but that can flip when the price of oil drops. Halterman says using biodiesel is like buying organic food. Sometimes the right thing costs more. However, he knows some people will only consider the option when fuel prices soar.
You know, we can be highly competitive with petroleum diesel, and when prices are this high, you know, it's super appealing. The problem is our margins get squeezed, you know, when you get much lower than they are even right now, because we don't do the volume that petroleum companies do, so we need to thrive on higher margins.
Higher gas and diesel prices are also fueling interest in other alternatives.
We're selling substantially more of the alternative fuels than we were even a month ago.
Mike Lewis is the general manager of Pearson Fuels in City Heights. His station sells regular gas and diesel, but also natural gas, ethanol, biodiesel, and propane. He says fuel sales are very sensitive to price. Ethanol 85 sales jumped from 250 gallons a day in February to 1,000 gallons a day in March.
So a month later, we're doing 4 times as much. And what will happen if the price of gas falls? We won't sell 1,000 for very long, but it'll go down gradually and probably level off at a point above 250 where it started.
He says the plateau always ends up being higher.
As much as people hate to see the price of gas go up, over the long run, it does force the choices that don't have to be forced when gasoline's $2 a gallon.
That was Eric Anderson reporting today. The current price for a gallon of regular is about $3.70. More than 1,500 homeless children throughout San Diego County will get some free school supplies this fall, thanks to the Drive for Success program by the County Office of Education. Non-perishable food, backpacks, books, and personal hygiene items were gathered by Feeding America volunteers for the students.
Recognizing that kids that don't have stable housing come into our schools and need additional services is what kind of levels the playing field for students and makes school and learning more accessible.
Drive for Success will collect the school items through August 3rd. We have information on how to donate or volunteer on our website, kpbs.org. The Chargers are letting fans have their say on the next member in its Hall of Fame. Online voting began today. The candidates are punter Darren Bennett, running back Natrone Means, and wide receiver Anthony Miller. You can vote online at chargers.com/HOF. In the past, a committee selected Hall of Famers. The late Junior Seau was the most recent inductee. Tonight in the public square, we got several comments about our story on a federal grand jury's investigation of a man's deadly encounter with Border Patrol agents. Anastasio Hernandez Rojos, a 42-year-old Mexican immigrant, died in May 2010 after he was tased multiple times by border agents who were deporting him. The agents said they used a stun gun because Rojos was combative. Harry Street wrote about this incident that you were seeing on our website. He says, could this whole event have been avoided had Rojos applied to live and work in the U.S. legally? Rojos' death is another example how we can't continue to allow things to be the way they are simply because people don't know better or fear change. Sadly, this will probably happen again, so as long as we do nothing. Web user Urban Pioneer responded to that post with, Harry, I don't know how familiar you are with immigration law. Getting a visa to live and work in the U.S. is very difficult. You can weigh in on this conversation or other news stories you've seen here on KPBS by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, or email us at publicsquare@kpbs.org. Recapping tonight's top stories, San Diego County Medical Examiner says there was a record number of suicides and murder-suicides last year. The ME's report also says prescription drugs killed more people than traffic accidents did. And the Food and Drug Administration has approved a drug to prevent the spread of HIV. The drug, called Truvada, has already been in use for people who already have the virus. Today's move allows the drug's maker to market Truvada to people at higher risk of getting HIV. And fun in the sun came with a sting to many Encinitas beachgoers this weekend. Lifeguards say 135 people got stung by jellyfish on Sunday. They say stinging jellyfish are coming north in warm water currents. The painful stings are typically not fatal and usually can be treated with water and vinegar. You can find more on tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.